Hello, I'm going to explain about project management, but I will give only short explanation about it since my groupmate will explain it much better because it is his report and as you can see at this picture, let me put some scenario that will connect with this picture. For example, you are planning to get some budget from a company because you have a certain project in your mind. So in order that to do that, you'll need to have a communication plan. So what are the things that you can see inside the communication plan? So at the first thing that you will see at the communication plan is a set of a structure of meeting documentation that will perform across an organization. So in a project plan, you are so if everyone here remember about the thing that Sir Fernandez taught us about communication is the number one key for making a project. So here you can apply that because it's this you are creating a flow in your team that will give them the precise information that will help them to succeed a project correctly.
Created using Powtoon.
So here, um, manage communication. In the workplace, directives from managers to employees are the most basic form of downward communication. This can be written manuals, handbooks, memos, and policies or oral presentations. Another example of downward communication is a board of directors instructing management to take a specific action. So here, after you plan a certain action that you need to do, you are here to manage your um, communication with your colleagues. So basically, you are here to talk about the project that you really wanted to do. And in order to do that, you will need time, patience, and a lot of effort to seek some knowledge to other people before you will go to the project manager and talk about the project you have. Once the project communication management plan has been created and approved, it's the project manager's job to ensure it's carried out successfully. This means the plan needs to be reviewed and updated on a regular basis to reflect any changes to the project or its stakeholders. The project manager also has to manage the execution of the project communication management plan. This includes
Created.
number one, collection and analysis of data. So here you need to evaluate everything that happened about the project that you wanted to do. And the second one is clean. You must clean the idea, like you need to be more precise about the project that you have. And number three, you need to summarize everything that happened in your data. So the second one is creation of messages for communication. So here, at creation of messages for communication, you need to balance everything when you are communicating with your audience. You need to be more precise and more clear when you say something because when you use a difficult word to a certain audience, sometimes they can't understand the word that you said and it's not that easy to memorize. So be careful of the word choice that you have when it comes to this and make sure that it's easy to recall the words that you use. And The third one is transmission or distribution of communication. So it's like enabling secure distribution of communication content through customers or preferred channels. Like you are preferring the things that your audience really wanted to do. Storage of any communication reports, file of or documents. Uh, the example here is the meetings, the information that you gathered from your colleagues about the suggestion about the projects, and next is the retrieval of any stored communication. Like uh, the good example is here in about the conversation that you have with your colleague before when both of you talk about the project that you want to do. And lastly, the disposal of any old communications upon project closure or a set date. So here, there are many changes in some project that you made. So they are things that we need to disregard. Monitor project communication. This process used to be called controlled communication but was updated in the sixth edition of the PM book. Despite the title change, the process is the same. It involves monitoring and controlling project communication throughout the entire life cycle. This may include the confirmation of the following.
Created using Powtoon.
Because of all the preparation that you have done, the communication went out as planned. They were received by the proper stakeholders. And the third one, messages were understood because you use like easy words that can easily remember. And the fourth one is any relevant feedback was provided to the appropriate project members.
Created using Powtoon.
Planned communication management. What is planned communication management? Planned communication management is a project management process that is involved in the development of the necessary approach for the project communication based on the needs and requirements pertaining to information. It is also based on the available organizational asset of the program. This particular process is under the project communication management. The benefit of this particular project management process is that it helps to identify and document the plans, approaches, or strategies in communicating effectively with the stakeholders. To create the plan communication management, necessary inputs are needed such as the project management plan, organizational process assets, and enterprise environmental factors. The project manager also need to get the stakeholder registered to know who the stakeholders are. It is important to take note that this project management process can be iterated as long as it is triggered by the control communication process. This means that this process has a continuous nature and can be triggered by the comparison of the actual and planned schedule, cost, and quality. Lastly, it is crucial for the project manager to evaluate the information to ensure that the right message is delivered to the stakeholders.
Created using Powtoon.
Plan communication management, a step-by-step guide. Step 1. Review the PMBOK. PMBOK stands for Project Management Body of Knowledge, and it is the entire collection of processes, best practices, terminologies, and guidelines that are accepted as standard within the project management industry. PMBOK stands for Project Management Body of Knowledge, and it is the entire collection of processes, best practices, terminologies, and guidelines that are accepted as standard within the project management industry. PMBOK is considered valuable for companies as it helps them standardize practices across various departments, tailor processes to suit specific needs, and prevent project failures.
Created using Powtoon.
Step 2. Determine stakeholder communication requirements. Refer to the stakeholder register and stakeholder management strategy if you have them. These should have been created during the project initiation process. This step require more than just creating a list of stakeholders. There are several key considerations to account for during this step of the communication management plan. First, you must ensure all stakeholders are identified. Many projects fail to do this only to discover it later, which result in project gaps, document changes, etc. Another key part of this step is determining all of the stakeholders' expectations, interest, and influence within the project. If a stakeholder's expectation is that this project should not result in any changes to his or her work, but you know it will, then this is where the discrepancies like this must be identified and resolved. Likewise, stakeholders will have varying degrees of interest and influence on a project. All of these characteristics should be captured and documented in the Communication Management Plan section, Stakeholder Communication Requirements. Specific communication methods, preferences, and frequencies for each stakeholder should be documented in the project stakeholder register as an appendix or attachment to the communication management plan.
Created using Powtoon.
Step 3. Determine level of detail for the plan. The communication management plan can be either a standalone subsidiary management plan or a section contained with the project management plan. Several determining factors will help you determine the scope and level of detail for your communication management plan. Size of project. Larger projects which span a longer time frame tend to have more communication requirements. Complexity of organization, for instance, a highly political environment within the organizations has very specific communication needs for the project to be successful. Number and location of stakeholder projects with a high number of stakeholders and or stakeholders from a wide geographic area may require more detailed planning of communication management.
Created using Powtoon.
Step 4. Determine communication constraints. All projects are subject to various constraints which must be identified and managed effectively to ensure project success. The communication management plan is no exception, so oftentimes a project's communications are subject to various constraints. These constraints may be financial, project budget allocated for communication, time dependent, adhering to scheduling regarding project communication, or dealing with other factors. Other communication constraints may include what types of technology are available for communications, any internal or external regulations and policies, or legislation that may require communications to be handled in a certain manner. Communication constraints should be identified during the project's planning phase, and every effort must be taken to ensure all constraints are identified and documented. If any constraints are missed, then it is likely that they will become evident later in the project's life cycle and impact the project's triple constraint: time, cost, and scope. All identified communication constraints should be contained in the communication constraint section of the communication management plan.
Created using Powtoon.
Step 5. Determine information to be communicated. This step may seem simple and self-explanatory, but on many projects, there are either significant gaps or overlaps in an information being communicated. There are many questions that need to be answered, such as who needs the information, how often do they need, and what information do they need. Small projects allow for more simplified communication without having to provide extreme detail in the planning. However, large and complex projects, which usually have many stakeholders with differing interests and influences, require very thorough and detailed planning. For large and complex projects, it is usually helpful for an organization to provide standard documents and templates for use in formal communication because it is simplifies the communication process and provides a level playing field and promotes understanding of what is being communicated. There may be standard status reports, meeting agendas, meeting minutes, gate reviews, or other documents which provide consistent format and content. Depending on the complexity of the project and the stakeholder communication requirements, the standard documents may need slight modification and a determination of the level of detail communicated must be made. However, the organizational standard should contain most of the key information that needs to be communicated for the project. Determining the information that needs to be communicated is the result of determining stakeholder communications requirements.
Created using Powtoon.
Step 6. Determine methodology for communication. Now that we know what needs to be communicated to whom and how often, we must determine how we are going to communicate the project information. Much like the other steps in completing the communications management plan, this help largely depends on the size and complexity of the project. Small project communication with few stakeholders may only require periodic meetings, emails, and phone calls. Large and complex projects again require much more detailed planning. Different types of communication may also require different methods of communication. For instance, project status meeting may be most effective in a face-to-face environment. However, some stakeholders may be located in different geographic regions so that the result may be a face-to-face meeting with a video teleconference capability where distant stakeholders have the capability of seeing briefing charts and participating in the conversation. Communication methodology is dependent on the technology available to stakeholders as well. There are many means for communicating project information. Some of these include email, phone calls, face-to-face meetings, databases, web internet portals, video teleconferences, organizational shared drives, or various other technologies and applications. The project team must consider what methods are available to all stakeholders and plan appropriately so pertinent project information can be communicated to everyone involved. Communication methodology is included in the communication.
Created using Powtoon.